A journey through 108 pearls of wisdom. Have you ever paused and wondered how ancient teachings could guide us through the noise and chaos of modern life? Imagine uncovering a treasure chest of timeless wisdom, 108 pearls of insight passed down through the teachings of the Buddha, and the search for meaning. In this video, we'll explore how the Buddha's teachings can illuminate our paths, just as they did for countless seekers before us. Through vivid metaphors and profound truths, like the restless bird longing to escape its cage or the heavy glass that becomes light when set down, we'll uncover the essence of mindfulness, the power of letting go, and the transformative potential of living with purpose. But here's the catch: this isn't just a history lesson. It's an invitation, an opportunity to take these teachings and weave them into the fabric of your daily life. By the end of this journey, you'll not only gain insight into the Buddha's path but also find actionable steps to create more peace, clarity, and joy in your own. So, are you ready to embark on this transformative journey? Let's dive into the 108 life lessons from the Buddha that hold the power to change your perspective, and perhaps your life. The first lesson: the bird in the cage. Imagine a bird trapped in a cage. No matter how well you feed it, no matter how comfortable its surroundings may seem, it remains restless, yearning for freedom. This metaphor beautifully encapsulates the human condition, the way our hearts and minds are often ensnared by attachments, fears, and the illusions of permanence. The Buddha teaches us that by contemplating the nature of our physical and mental states, we can uncover a profound truth: nothing is truly constant. Everything we cling to, our possessions, relationships, even our self-image, is subject to change. When we see this clearly, a sense of disillusionment arises, not in a negative way, but as a liberating force. Just like the bird that longs to escape its cage, we too begin to seek freedom from the cycles of suffering caused by attachment. Practical reflection. Take a moment to reflect on what cages you might be living in. Are they the expectations of others, a fear of failure, or perhaps an over-reliance on material comfort? What would it take for you to loosen these bars, even slightly? The first step is awareness. The power of the Dhamma, clearing the path. Think of your mind as a cluttered room. Until you sweep away the dirt and chaos, there's no space for clarity or light. The Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, acts as a broom, removing the wrong views and harmful habits that cloud our judgment and lead to suffering. Only when the dirt is cleared can goodness, wisdom, and peace take root. This transformative power is why the Buddha's teachings are revered across time and cultures. They offer more than just insight, they provide tools for real change. It's like polishing a mirror. Initially, the reflection is dull and unclear, but with effort, it becomes bright and sharp. Modern perspective. Consider how this applies to our fast-paced lives. We're often overwhelmed with distractions, from endless notifications to societal pressures. Taking time to meditate, journal, or simply pause to breathe can act as a broom to clear away mental clutter. The cleaner the space within, the more room there is for wisdom to grow. Your own witness, turning inward. The Buddha once said, "You are your own refuge. Who else could be?" This profound statement reminds us that true understanding comes from direct experience, not from blindly following others. Imagine someone describing the taste of a fruit. You might understand their words, but you won't truly know it until you've tasted it yourself. The same applies to the Dhamma. Meditation and mindfulness are the tools that help us become our own witnesses. By observing our thoughts, emotions, and reactions, we start to see the patterns that govern our lives. Over time, This practice dissolves illusions and brings us closer to the truth. Personal story. Let me share a small example. A friend once struggled with anger, blaming others for every frustration. When they started meditating, they noticed their own role in escalating conflicts. Slowly, they began to pause, breathe, and respond with compassion instead of reacting with anger. This subtle shift transformed not only their relationships but also their inner peace. The language of the Dhamma, a universal tongue. All languages, spoken and unspoken, merge into one when it comes to the Dhamma. It speaks directly to the heart, beyond words and concepts. The Buddha's teachings don't require translation when practiced. Their truth resonates universally. Imagine someone burdened by the weight of a heavy glass of water. If they hold it for a minute, it's manageable. But hold it for an hour, a day, or a lifetime, and the weight becomes unbearable. The act of putting it down, of letting go, speaks volumes without a single word. This is the language of the Dhamma, a language that teaches us to release what no longer serves us. Actionable takeaway. Think of one heavy glass you're holding in your life, a resentment, a fear, or a grudge. What would it feel like to set it down? Even for a moment. Try this the next time you feel overwhelmed. Close your eyes. Take 3 deep breaths. And imagine releasing the weight. Practice this daily. And notice the lightness it brings. The foundation of goodness, clearing the soil. The Buddha compared cultivating goodness to preparing the soil for planting. Before you can grow anything of value, you must remove the weeds. In the same way, before goodness and wisdom can flourish in your life, you must address the harmful tendencies, anger, greed, ignorance, that choke your growth. The first step is self-awareness, recognizing these weeds within yourself. The second step is consistent effort to uproot them. It's not a one-time task but an ongoing process. Like gardening, some weeds are stubborn and deep-rooted. But with patience and persistence, they can be cleared. Modern application. Think of your daily habits. Do you scroll endlessly on your phone? Procrastinate? Or let small irritations fester? These are the weeds of modern life, distracting you from meaningful pursuits. By adopting practices like mindfulness or a gratitude journal, you can cultivate the mental soil for positivity and focus. The weight of holding on, learning to let go. One of the most powerful metaphors in the Buddha's teachings is the story of holding a hot coal. Imagine clutching a burning piece of charcoal in your hand. The longer you hold it, the more it burns. The only way to stop the pain is to let go. This coal symbolizes our attachments, our grudges, desires, and fears. Letting go doesn't mean giving up or becoming indifferent. It means releasing the emotional grip that causes suffering. By loosening your hold, you create space for peace and clarity. Personal story. A close friend of mine was deeply hurt by a betrayal at work. They carried that resentment for months, replaying the events in their mind. One day, during a meditation retreat, they realized that holding on to anger was only hurting themselves. They chose to forgive, not for the other person, but for their own peace. Almost immediately, they felt lighter and more at ease. Takeaway exercise. Reflect on something you've been holding on to, an unresolved conflict, a mistake, or a fear. Write it down on a piece of paper. Then, in a symbolic act, crumple the paper and throw it away. Commit to letting it go mentally as well. The simplicity of the middle way. The middle way is one of the Buddha's central teachings. It's about avoiding extremes, neither indulging in excess nor depriving yourself unnecessarily. Imagine a stringed instrument. If the strings are too tight, they break. If they're too loose, they produce no sound. The right tension creates harmony. This principle applies to every aspect of life, work, relationships, even self-care. Balance is the key to sustainability and joy. Practical application. In today's fast-paced world, we often swing between overworking and burnout, or between dieting and binging. Embracing the middle way might mean setting boundaries at work, enjoying food mindfully without guilt, or balancing screen time with time in nature. Example story. A monk once explained the middle way to a musician who struggled with his practice. "Play your life like you would tune your lute," the monk said. The musician, applying this wisdom, found balance in both his art and his spiritual path. The cycle of craving, breaking the habit. Craving, or tanha, is one of the core causes of suffering identified by the Buddha. It's like a fisherman's hook. We see something shiny, a new gadget, a compliment, or a fleeting pleasure, and we bite. Before we know it, we're caught, struggling to free ourselves. The key to breaking free is mindfulness. By observing our cravings without acting on them, we weaken their power over us. Over time, the mind learns to let go of its habitual grasping. Real-world example. Think about online shopping. Have you ever felt the rush of buying something you didn't need, only to regret it later? This is a modern manifestation of craving. Next time, pause before hitting buy now. Take 3 deep breaths and ask yourself, do I truly need this? Often, you'll find the craving fades away. The teacup. Seeing beyond attachments. There's a story about a revered Buddhist monk who was given a beautiful teacup during his travels. He admired its craftsmanship but treated it as though it were already broken. When someone asked why, he replied, "Because everything is impermanent. By accepting that this cup will one day break, I can enjoy it without attachment." This story illustrates the wisdom of seeing beyond attachments. When we cling to people or things as if they'll last forever, we set ourselves up for disappointment. By embracing impermanence, we can love and appreciate without fear of loss. Reflection question. What in your life are you clinging to? How would your perspective change if you treated it as temporary? Practice gratitude for the present moment, knowing that it won't last forever. Pouncing on fire. The untrained mind. An untrained mind is like a child who doesn't know the danger of fire. It reaches out impulsively, causing harm to itself. This is why the Buddha emphasized training the mind through mindfulness and meditation. With a trained mind, we develop the wisdom to avoid harmful reactions and choose skillful responses. Practical tip. Next time you feel anger or frustration rising, pause before reacting. Take a deep breath. Label the emotion, "I feel angry," and observe it without judgment. This simple practice can prevent impulsive actions and bring clarity to challenging situations. Conclusion for this section. As we delve deeper into the 108 lessons, it becomes clear that the Buddha's teachings are not abstract philosophies but practical guides for daily living. Whether it's letting go of attachments, finding balance, or training the mind, each lesson offers a stepping stone toward inner peace and freedom. Let me know if you'd like me to continue the next section, focusing on more examples, stories, and actionable takeaways. Awakening to Dhamma, the moment of insight. Awakening to the Dhamma is often portrayed as an extraordinary, almost unreachable event. But the Buddha's teachings remind us that awakening begins with simple realizations, seeing what is harmful and letting it go. Recognizing what is beneficial and nurturing it. This process isn't reserved for monks in solitude, it's accessible to all of us in our daily lives. Practical example. Imagine a gardener noticing weeds taking over their plants. The moment they recognize the harm, they take action to remove them. Similarly, when you identify toxic habits or thoughts in your life, such as constant comparison or self-criticism, you've taken the first step toward awakening. Acting on this awareness, even in small ways, leads to profound change. Reflection exercise. At the end of each day, spend 5 minutes reflecting on your actions and thoughts. Ask yourself, what brought me peace today? What caused me stress? Over time, this practice of self-awareness will illuminate your path to awakening. The stick in the stream, navigating pleasure and pain. The Buddha likened the mind to a stick floating in a stream. If it doesn't get caught on the banks of pleasure or pain, it flows smoothly toward the ocean of liberation. This metaphor reminds us that both joy and sorrow can trap us if we cling to them. Modern insight. Think of how we often chase happiness, whether through career success, relationships, or material possessions, only to feel dissatisfied once we attain them. Similarly, when faced with pain, we resist and prolong our suffering. The key is to navigate these experiences without attachment, letting them come and go like waves. Personal story. I once knew a man who lost his job unexpectedly. Initially, he was devastated. But instead of clinging to his pain, he used it as an opportunity to reflect. He realized the job wasn't aligned with his passions and started a small business doing what he loved. By not being trapped in sorrow, he found a new sense of purpose. Takeaway. When you experience something joyful or painful, remind yourself, this too shall pass. Practicing equanimity allows you to appreciate the highs without clinging and endure the lows without despair. The hook of craving, escaping the trap. Craving is like a fishhook, enticing at first but deeply harmful once we bite. We often think, if I just have this one thing, I'll be happy. But the satisfaction is fleeting. And soon we're chasing the next shiny object. Real-world analogy. Consider the cycle of upgrading smartphones. Each new model seems essential, promising better features and status. Yet, within months, another model comes along, and the cycle repeats. This endless craving keeps us trapped in dissatisfaction. Practical step. Try a craving detox. For 1 week, refrain from buying anything non-essential. Instead, focus on appreciating what you already have. Notice how this shift impacts your sense of contentment. The tree and the base, teaching through layers. The Buddha's teachings are like a great tree. You can start at the roots, understanding the foundational principles, or at the branches, exploring more advanced insights. Both paths eventually lead to the same understanding, the tree as a whole. Illustrative story. A student once asked a monk how to begin practicing Dhamma. The monk handed him a seed and said, "Plant this. Water it. Watch it grow." Years later, when the tree bore fruit, the monk explained, "Your journey of planting, nurturing, and waiting mirrors the path of Dhamma. It takes time and patience, but the results are worth it." Takeaway for daily life. Whether you're just beginning to explore mindfulness or have been practicing for years, remember that growth happens gradually. Trust the process, and don't rush to reach the top of the tree. Just right, finding balance in practice. Look at any Buddha statue. And you'll notice the perfect posture, neither leaning forward nor backward, but sitting just right. This symbolizes the middle way, a balanced approach to life and spiritual practice. Practical tip: in your own practice, whether it's meditation, work, or relationships, avoid extremes. For instance, in meditation, don't force yourself to sit for hours if it feels overwhelming. Start with just 5 to 10 minutes a day and build from there. Consistency is more important than intensity. Story of balance. There's a tale of a monk who practiced so rigorously that he became physically ill. The Buddha advised him to rest, saying, "Even the most skilled musician tunes their instrument to the right pitch. Too tight, and the strings break. Too loose, and they make no sound." The spider's web, mindfulness at the center. The mind, like a spider in its web, rests at the center of our sense experiences, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and thoughts. When a spider is alert, it senses every vibration on the web and reacts skillfully. Similarly, mindfulness keeps us aware of our reactions to the world around us. Everyday application. Imagine receiving an upsetting email. Without mindfulness, you might react impulsively, typing an angry reply. But with mindfulness, you pause, observe your emotional response, and choose a calmer, more constructive reaction. This simple practice can transform your relationships and inner peace. Mindfulness exercise. Try this the next time you feel overwhelmed. Pause. Take 3 slow breaths, and name what you're feeling, e.g., anger, frustration. This creates a moment of awareness, allowing you to respond rather than react. Only one hole open, focusing your energy. The Buddha compared the mind to a water cooler with a single opening. If you pour water from the wrong side, nothing comes out. Similarly, when we scatter our energy and attention, we achieve little. Focus, however, channels our efforts effectively. Practical advice. In a world of multitasking, commit to single tasking instead. Whether it's a work project or a conversation with a loved one, give it your full attention. You'll find that the quality of your output and your satisfaction improves dramatically. Conclusion for this section. The Buddha's teachings, though ancient, remain profoundly relevant to modern life. They offer us a way to navigate challenges with wisdom, cultivate inner peace, and live with purpose. By reflecting on these lessons and applying them step by step, we begin to transform not just ourselves but the world around us. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with additional lessons, stories, or insights. The chicken in the cage, freedom within boundaries. The Buddha often used simple, relatable analogies to explain profound truths. One such analogy is the chicken in the cage. Imagine a chicken confined to a cage. It walks back and forth, restless, but within the boundaries of the cage. Similarly, our minds often wander restlessly within the confines of our attachments and illusions. The cage represents the limitations we impose on ourselves through ignorance and craving. Modern insight. Consider how we impose cages in our daily lives, obsessing over work deadlines, social approval, or financial success. While these pursuits may seem necessary, they can confine us if we don't approach them mindfully. Takeaway practice. When you feel trapped by your circumstances, Pause and ask yourself, is this cage real? Or have I created it? Practice mindfulness to observe your thoughts and emotions without judgment. Over time, you'll notice that many of these cages are illusions created by the mind. Loosening the bolt, understanding impermanence. Another powerful metaphor the Buddha used is loosening a bolt. Tighten it too much, and it becomes impossible to move. Loosen it, and it becomes flexible, allowing change. The bolt symbolizes our grasping, whether it's to material possessions, relationships, or our sense of self. Understanding impermanence, anicca, is like loosening the bolt. It doesn't mean we stop caring, but rather that we accept change as a natural part of life. This acceptance reduces the tension and suffering caused by resistance. Personal reflection. I once struggled with the loss of a close friendship. For months, I clung to the idea of how things used to be, causing myself unnecessary pain. It wasn't until I embraced the impermanence of relationships, acknowledging that people grow and change, that I found peace. Letting go didn't mean forgetting, it meant appreciating the memories without clinging to the past. Action step. Identify one area in your life where you're resisting change. It could be a job transition, a move, or a shift in a relationship. Write down 3 positive opportunities that this change could bring. Shifting your perspective from resistance to acceptance. Moving the glass, practicing concentration. Samadhi, or concentration, is an essential aspect of Buddhist practice. The Buddha often compared it to moving a glass of water. When you lift a glass, you feel its weight. If you keep holding it without putting it down, the weight feels heavier over time. The same applies to our mental burdens. Practicing concentration allows us to put down the glass, even if only temporarily, to rest and recharge. Practical exercise. Start with a simple mindfulness practice. Sit quietly for 5 minutes, focusing solely on your breath. When your mind wanders, gently bring it back to the sensation of breathing. This practice helps you put down the glass of stress and regain mental clarity. Example story. A student once asked a monk how to focus better during meditation. The monk handed him a glass of water and asked him to carry it without spilling a drop. After just a few minutes, the student noticed how his mind naturally focused on the task. The monk smiled and said, "When your intention is clear, the mind will follow." The teacup, loving without attachment. The story of the teacup is a profound lesson in embracing impermanence. A monk admired a beautiful teacup but treated it as though it were already broken. By doing so, he could enjoy its beauty without fear of losing it. This approach applies not just to possessions but to relationships, goals, and even life itself. Modern insight. In today's world, we often cling to the idea of permanence, whether it's expecting a relationship to stay the same or assuming our health will never falter. When change inevitably occurs, we feel shaken. Adopting the monk's mindset allows us to appreciate what we have without being paralyzed by the fear of loss. Reflection question. Think about something you deeply value. How would your perspective shift if you saw it as temporary? Use this perspective to practice gratitude for the present moment. Pouncing on fire, training the mind. An untrained mind is like a child who doesn't understand danger. It reaches out impulsively, pouncing on fire and causing harm to itself. This metaphor highlights the importance of mindfulness and self-control. By training the mind, we develop the wisdom to navigate life's challenges skillfully. Practical tip. The next time you feel anger, frustration, or impulsivity rising, pause and count to 10 before reacting. This simple practice can prevent hasty decisions and help you respond thoughtfully instead of emotionally. Illustrative story. A young monk once asked the Buddha how to deal with anger. The Buddha told him to visualize a burning fire. When you're angry, it's like holding that fire in your hands, he said. The longer you hold it, the more it burns you. Let it go, and you'll find peace. The spider and the web, staying mindful amid distractions. The mind, like a spider, sits at the center of its web, sensing every vibration. When a spider is alert, it reacts skillfully to what enters its web. Similarly, mindfulness allows us to respond wisely to the vibrations of life, whether they're external challenges or internal emotions. Everyday application. Imagine being stuck in traffic. Instead of letting frustration consume you, use the time to practice mindfulness. Focus on your breath or observe your surroundings without judgment. This shift in perspective transforms an otherwise stressful experience into a moment of peace. Mindfulness challenge. For the next week, set aside 5 minutes daily to practice mindful observation. Choose an activity like eating, walking, or washing dishes, and focus on every sensation involved. Notice how this simple practice enhances your awareness. The single whole, focusing your energy. The Buddha compared the mind to a water jug with only one opening. If you pour water from the wrong side, it won't flow. Similarly, when we scatter our energy and attention, we achieve little. Concentrating on one goal or task at a time channels our efforts effectively. Practical advice. If you feel overwhelmed by a long to-do list, prioritize your tasks and tackle them one at a time. Multitasking often leads to stress and poor results. Focused attention, on the other hand, boosts both efficiency and satisfaction. Example story. A student once asked a teacher how to succeed in life. The teacher gave him a magnifying glass and a piece of paper, asking him to focus sunlight through the glass. At first, nothing happened. But as the sunlight concentrated, the paper began to burn. The teacher said, "Your mind is like this. Concentrate it, and you can achieve anything." Conclusion for this section. As we continue exploring these timeless lessons, it's clear that the Buddha's teachings provide practical tools for navigating life's complexities. Whether it's learning to let go, finding balance, or focusing our energy, these insights offer a path to peace and clarity. Let me know if you'd like the next section, where we delve further into the transformative power of mindfulness and wisdom. Seeing the fullness, the essence of merit. The Buddha described merit not as something external, but as an internal state of serenity and fulfillment. Imagine eating a delicious meal. While the act of eating is a physical process, the feeling of satisfaction, the fullness, is what truly matters. Similarly, when we perform good deeds, their true value lies not in the external act, but in the peace and joy they bring to the mind. Modern application. Consider a time when you helped someone in need, a friend, a stranger, or even an animal. The act itself may have been simple, but the warmth and satisfaction you felt afterward lingered much longer. That feeling is the fullness the Buddha speaks of. A sense of inner merit. Reflection practice. At the end of each day, think of one act of kindness you performed, no matter how small. Reflect on the feeling it brought you and let that gratitude deepen your sense of purpose. The teacup again, handling loss. The story of the monk and the teacup offers yet another layer of wisdom. Beyond appreciating impermanence, it teaches us how to handle loss gracefully. When we expect things to break, end, or change. We're not caught off guard when they do. This doesn't mean we become indifferent, but rather that we develop resilience. Practical tip. Think of a cherished item, relationship, or moment in your life. Practice mentally releasing your attachment to it, not to diminish its value, but to remind yourself of its impermanence. This exercise strengthens your ability to handle loss without losing balance. Story. A woman once came to the Buddha grieving the loss of her child. She begged him to bring the child back to life. The Buddha asked her to find a mustard seed from a household that had never experienced loss. After searching the entire village, she realized every home had its own suffering. Her grief transformed into understanding, and she began to heal. Pouncing on fire, mastering impulses. The Buddha often compared the untrained mind to a child pouncing on fire. Without guidance, the mind impulsively reacts to desires and fears, often causing harm. Training the mind through mindfulness allows us to pause, reflect, and choose our actions wisely. Everyday application. When faced with an impulsive urge, whether it's anger, overindulgence, or procrastination, practice pausing. Take 3 slow breaths and ask yourself, will this action bring long-term peace or short-term relief? This simple pause can prevent regret and cultivate wisdom. Example. A young man I know struggled with reacting angrily to criticism. After practicing this pause and reflect technique, he noticed his reactions softened. Over time, his relationships improved, and he found greater inner calm. The tree's growth, patience in practice. The Buddha likened spiritual growth to the growth of a tree. You can't force a tree to grow faster by pulling at its branches. Instead, you must water it, give it sunlight, and wait patiently. Similarly, our practice requires consistent effort and trust in the process. Modern insight. In today's instant gratification culture, patience is a rare virtue. Whether it's learning a skill, healing from a setback, or deepening meditation, trust that progress takes time. Each small step contributes to the larger growth. Reflection exercise. Think of an area in your life where you feel impatient, perhaps a career goal, personal growth, or a relationship. Write down 3 small actions you can take daily to nurture that area. Celebrate each step, no matter how small. The stick in the stream, avoiding extremes. The mind is like a stick floating in a stream. If it gets caught on the bank of pleasure, it stagnates. If it gets caught on the bank of pain, it struggles. True freedom comes from allowing the stick to flow naturally, unattached to either extreme. Modern example. Think about social media. It's easy to get caught in the pleasure bank of likes and validation or the pain bank of comparison and negativity. Practicing mindfulness while using social media, setting limits and reflecting on its impact, helps you stay in the stream without becoming trapped. Takeaway. When you encounter a joyful experience, enjoy it without clinging. When you face a painful experience, acknowledge it without resistance. This balance is the essence of equanimity. The hook of craving, breaking free. Craving is like a hook that catches the mind. Whether it's the law of wealth, recognition, or fleeting pleasures, craving pulls us away from peace. The Buddha taught that by observing our cravings with mindfulness, we weaken their grip. Actionable step. Next time you feel a craving arise, whether it's for a material item or a specific outcome, pause and investigate it. Ask yourself, what am I really seeking? Will this bring lasting happiness? Often, you'll find that the craving is a mask for a deeper need, such as connection or self-worth. Illustrative story. A merchant once asked the Buddha why he was never satisfied despite his wealth. The Buddha gave him a cup of water and said, "Drink until you're full." The merchant drank but remained thirsty. The Buddha explained, "Your wealth is like this water. No matter how much you consume, it won't quench the thirst for peace that can only be found within the coconut water, refining virtue." The Buddha compared spiritual growth to refining coconut water. At first, the water is raw and rough, but through refinement, it becomes clear and sweet. Similarly, our practice begins with effort and discipline but gradually transforms into natural ease and joy. Personal reflection. When I first started meditating, it felt like a chore. My mind wandered constantly, and I doubted whether it was working. Over time, as I stayed consistent, moments of clarity began to emerge. What once felt difficult became a source of peace. Encouragement. If you're struggling with a spiritual practice, remember that every effort counts. Even the days when it feels hard are part of the process. Keep refining, and you'll taste the sweetness. The heavy glass, putting down the burden. The Buddha's metaphor of the heavy glass reminds us that much of our suffering comes from holding onto things we could let go of. Whether it's grudges, stress, or unrealistic expectations, the act of putting it down brings immediate relief. Practical exercise. Before bed tonight, write down one worry or resentment you've been holding onto. Then, symbolically let it go by tearing up the paper or placing it in a box. Over time, this ritual trains the mind to release unnecessary burdens. Conclusion: living the Dhamma. As we reflect on these lessons, it becomes clear that the Buddha's teachings are not just ancient philosophy, they are a timeless guide to navigating modern life. From letting go of cravings to finding balance in joy and sorrow, these teachings offer us a way to live with greater clarity, peace, and purpose. Call to action. Take one lesson from today's exploration and apply it in your life this week. Whether it's practicing mindfulness, letting go of a burden, or finding balance, each step brings you closer to the path of freedom and fulfillment. Let me know if you'd like to explore the next set of lessons or dive deeper into any specific aspect. The blind person, understanding without direct experience. The Buddha once shared an analogy about a blind person trying to understand the color white. No matter how eloquently someone describes it, the blind person can't truly comprehend it without direct experience. Similarly, we cannot grasp the ultimate truths of the Dhamma, such as Nibbana, through intellectual understanding alone. True insight comes from direct practice and personal realization. Modern insight. Think about learning a skill like swimming or riding a bike. You can read all the manuals and watch countless tutorials, but until you get into the water or onto the bike, you won't truly understand. The Dhamma works the same way. It's experiential, not just conceptual. Practical application. If you've been reading about mindfulness or meditation but haven't practiced, take the first step today. Start small, 5 minutes of focused breathing. Over time, these moments of practice will lead to deeper understanding. The seed of the jackfruit, hidden potential. The Buddha compared a seed to human potential. A jackfruit seed doesn't look like a tree, but with the right conditions, soil, water, and sunlight, it grows into a massive, fruitful tree. Similarly, we all carry the potential for wisdom, compassion, and enlightenment. even if it's not immediately visible. Illustrative story. A farmer once overlooked a small, weak sapling in his field. Years later, that sapling had grown into the strongest tree on his land, providing shade and sustenance. The same is true of our inner potential. It may seem small or insignificant now, but with care and persistence, it can grow into something extraordinary. Reflection exercise. Think about an area in your life where you feel small or inadequate. What small, consistent actions can you take to nurture growth in that area? Trust in your potential, even if you can't see the results yet. Running in circles, breaking free from habitual patterns. The Buddha described the human tendency to run in circles, repeating the same mistakes and habits without reflection. It's like a chicken scratching the ground. It doesn't get very far, no matter how much effort it puts in. Without mindfulness, we risk living our lives on autopilot, trapped in cycles of craving, aversion, and ignorance. Modern insight. Think about the routines you follow daily. Are they bringing you closer to your goals? Or are you stuck in patterns that don't serve you? For example, checking your phone first thing in the morning might seem harmless, but it sets the tone for distraction rather than focus. Actionable tip. Identify one unhelpful habit and replace it with a mindful alternative. For instance, instead of scrolling on your phone upon waking, spend 5 minutes journaling or meditating. Breaking even one habitual pattern can create ripple effects of positive change. The heavy glass revisited, knowing when to let go. Returning to the metaphor of the heavy glass, the Buddha emphasized that many of our burdens are self-imposed. We hold on to stress, resentment, or unrealistic expectations, believing we must carry them. But the moment we put the glass down, by letting go of attachment, we feel immediate relief. Practical example. Think about a recent argument or conflict. Are you still replaying it in your mind, holding on to the weight of anger or regret? Practice forgiveness, not for the other person's sake, but for your own peace of mind. Exercise. Close your eyes and visualize the burden you're carrying. Imagine placing it on the ground and walking away. Repeat this visualization whenever you feel overwhelmed. Talk about blindness, the mystery of Nibbana. The Buddha often described Nibbana, complete liberation, as something beyond words and concepts. Trying to explain it is like describing a vivid sunset to someone who has never seen light. This mystery isn't meant to frustrate us but to encourage us to seek direct experience rather than relying solely on descriptions. Personal reflection. Consider something in your life that felt impossible to describe, a profound emotion, a moment of deep connection, or a sudden insight. These experiences hint at the ineffable nature of Nibbana. They remind us that some truths are beyond language. Encouragement. Instead of trying to figure out Nibbana intellectually, focus on the steps of the path, ethical living, mindfulness, and meditation. Each step brings you closer to this ultimate freedom. Craving as a slow poison, a daily choice. Craving, the Buddha taught, is like a slow-acting poison. It may seem harmless at first, after all. Who doesn't want comfort, pleasure, or success? But unchecked, craving pulls us further from peace and deeper into dissatisfaction. Modern example. Think about the cycle of consumerism. We buy the latest gadgets or clothes, seeking happiness. But the feeling fades quickly. Then we crave the next thing. This endless loop keeps us stuck in dissatisfaction. Actionable step. Practice gratitude. Each day, write down 3 things you already have that bring you joy or comfort. This simple act shifts your focus from craving what you lack to appreciating what you have. The spider's mind, staying alert. The mind, like a spider in its web, must remain alert to external influences. If we aren't mindful, we risk getting entangled in unnecessary distractions or negative emotions. But when the mind is trained, it can observe without reacting, responding skillfully to whatever arises. Everyday application. Imagine being at a noisy cafe. Instead of getting irritated by the sounds, practice mindfulness. Notice the sounds without labeling them as good or bad. This practice helps you develop a calm, observant mind in any situation. Mindfulness exercise. Spend 5 minutes each day observing your surroundings without judgment. Whether it's the sound of traffic, the feel of the wind, or the hum of a refrigerator, practice simply noticing. The water cooler, focusing your efforts. The Buddha used the analogy of a water cooler with one hole to emphasize focus. If we try to pour water out from a side without an opening, nothing will flow. Similarly, if we scatter our efforts, we achieve little. Concentrating our energy and attention on one goal at a time leads to success. Modern insight. In today's multitasking culture, it's easy to spread ourselves too thin. Whether it's managing work, family, or personal goals, focus is essential. By dedicating time and energy to one task at a time, we can achieve more with less stress. Practical tip. Use the Pomodoro technique to focus. Work on a single task for 25 minutes. Then take a 5-minute break. This method trains your mind to concentrate while avoiding burnout. Conclusion for this section. The Buddha's teachings remind us that the path to peace and liberation is both profound and practical. Whether it's breaking free from habitual patterns, letting go of burdens, or cultivating focus, each lesson offers a way to transform our lives. Call to action. Choose one lesson from today's exploration, whether it's mindfulness, letting go, or focusing your efforts, and commit to practicing it this week. Small steps, when taken consistently, lead to great transformations. Let me know if you'd like to continue with the next set of teachings or dive deeper into any specific aspect. Note 1. Know them all, the universal truths. The Buddha taught that understanding one thing deeply can lead to understanding everything. Because all phenomena share the same core characteristics: impermanence, anicca, unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and not self, anatta. This idea is like recognizing the essence of a single wave to understand the ocean. Illustrative example. A farmer who truly understands the nature of one crop, its need for sunlight, water, and nutrients, can apply this knowledge to other crops. Similarly, by deeply observing one thought, emotion, or sensation, we can uncover the universal truths that govern our entire experience. Practical exercise. During your next meditation session, focus on one sensation, such as the breath. Observe its changing nature, how it arises, stays for a moment, and fades. Reflect on how this impermanence applies to other aspects of life, like emotions or relationships. The sound of silence, finding peace amid noise. The Buddha emphasized that peace isn't about eliminating all noise or distractions, but about finding stillness within ourselves. Imagine being in a busy marketplace. Instead of focusing on the chaos, you tune into the steady rhythm of your breath. This shift creates an inner calm, even in the midst of activity. Modern insight. We live in a noisy world: emails, notifications, endless demands. But instead of waiting for the world to quiet down, we can cultivate inner silence through mindfulness. Mindfulness practice. The next time you're in a noisy or stressful environment, close your eyes for a moment, if safe to do so, and take 3 deep breaths. Notice how this brief pause brings you back to the present moment and anchors you in peace. The stick floating in the stream, the middle path. The Buddha's metaphor of the stick in the stream returns here with a deeper meaning. Life's currents, pleasure and pain, can sweep us away if we're not mindful. The middle path teaches us to stay balanced, neither clinging to pleasure nor resisting pain. Personal story. A friend of mine struggled with dieting, swinging between indulgence and strict restriction. After learning about the middle path, they began practicing mindful eating, savoring food without overeating. This balanced approach not only improved their health but also their relationship with food. Actionable step. Identify one area in your life where you experience extremes, whether it's work, exercise, or leisure. Experiment with finding a middle way that feels sustainable and nurturing. The hook of desire, breaking the cycle. Desire is like a fishhook that pulls us into the cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. The Buddha taught that while some desires, like the wish for enlightenment, are skillful, many are traps that lead to suffering. Modern example. Consider how we chase external validation through social media. A single like feels gratifying, but it's never enough. The more we seek, the more trapped we feel. Recognizing this cycle is the first step toward freedom. Reflection exercise. Take a break from social media or another habit that feeds unnecessary craving. Notice how this absence impacts your mood and mental clarity. Use this time to engage in activities that nourish your inner peace. The spider's web, alertness in practice. The mind, like a spider in its web, must remain alert and aware of its surroundings. When we're mindful, we sense disturbances, whether they're external distractions or internal emotions, and can respond skillfully. Everyday application. Imagine receiving an unexpected criticism. Without mindfulness, you might react defensively or with anger. But by pausing and observing the situation, you can respond thoughtfully, maintaining your peace. Mindfulness practice. At the start of your day, set an intention to remain alert to your emotions. Throughout the day, check in with yourself. What am I feeling? How am I responding? This habit builds emotional intelligence and resilience. The water cooler and focus, channeling energy effectively. The Buddha's analogy of the water cooler with one hole reminds us of the importance of focus. When our energy is scattered, our efforts yield little. But when we concentrate on one goal or task, we unlock our full potential. Modern insight. In a world of multitasking, focus is a superpower. Whether it's dedicating uninterrupted time to work, relationships, or personal growth, single tasking leads to greater satisfaction and results. Practical tip. Set aside focus blocks during your day. For instance, dedicate 30 minutes to a single task without distractions. Use tools like timers or apps to help maintain your focus. Notice how this practice enhances both productivity and peace. The teacup revisited, appreciating the moment. The story of the teacup reminds us not only of impermanence but also of the joy of appreciating each moment fully. By treating the teacup as already broken, the monk freed himself from the fear of loss and enjoyed its beauty while it lasted. Everyday reflection. Think about a moment today that brought you joy, a smile, a kind word, a delicious meal. Take a moment to savor it without clinging. This practice deepens your gratitude and enriches your experience of life. Exercise. Before bed tonight, recall 3 moments from your day that you're grateful for. Reflect on them with a sense of appreciation and impermanence. The chicken in the cage, finding freedom within. The story of the chicken in the cage illustrates that even within limitations, there is room for freedom. The chicken may be confined, but its movements within the cage are its own. Modern insight. In life, we may face constraints, work responsibilities, family obligations, or societal expectations. But within these boundaries, we can still cultivate a sense of freedom by shifting our mindset. Practical example. If you feel restricted by your job or routine, find small ways to reclaim joy. It could be as simple as a mindful lunch break, a short walk in nature, or setting boundaries to protect your personal time. Conclusion for this section. The Buddha's teachings continue to reveal timeless truths, guiding us toward balance, mindfulness, and inner freedom. Whether it's focusing our efforts, embracing impermanence, or breaking free from craving, these lessons empower us to navigate life with wisdom and grace. Call to action. Choose one teaching from this section to implement in your daily life. Whether it's practicing gratitude, mindfulness, or focus, let it be a step on your path toward greater clarity and peace. Let me know if you'd like to continue with the next set of teachings or dive deeper into any specific aspect. Learning about fire, wisdom through experience. The Buddha often used fire as a metaphor for suffering. A child, unaware of the danger, might reach out to touch a flame. Only after being burned does the child understand the consequences. Similarly, in life, we often act on desires or aversions without understanding the harm they cause. True wisdom comes from experiencing and learning from these burns. Modern insight. Think about how we often repeat mistakes, staying in toxic relationships, procrastinating on important tasks, or overspending, until the consequences force us to change. These experiences are like fire, teaching us lessons we might otherwise ignore. Reflection exercise. Identify one fire in your life, a situation where you've been burned by repeating the same mistake. Reflect on what this experience has taught you and how you can use that lesson to avoid future suffering. The middle way, the balance between effort and rest. One of the Buddha's most famous teachings is the middle way, avoiding extremes of indulgence and self-denial. He likened it to tuning a lute. If the strings are too tight, they snap. If they're too loose, they don't produce sound. The same principle applies to our lives and spiritual practices. Example story. A young monk once meditated so intensely that he neglected his health and fell ill. The Buddha advised him to eat well, rest, and find balance. Over time, the monk realized that a sustainable practice requires both effort and self-care. Practical application. If you're feeling overwhelmed or burnt out, consider where you might be over-tightening the strings in your life. Set aside time for rest and rejuvenation. Whether through meditation, spending time in nature, or simply enjoying a hobby. The jackfruit seed revisited, growth hidden in patience. The Buddha's analogy of the jackfruit seed reminds us that growth is often invisible at first. Just as a seed requires time and care to sprout into a tree, our spiritual and personal growth unfolds gradually. Modern insight. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to feel frustrated when progress isn't immediate. Whether it's learning a skill, healing from emotional pain, or deepening mindfulness, Trust that growth is happening beneath the surface. Reflection practice. Think of a long-term goal or practice you've been working on. Write down 3 small signs of progress you've noticed, even if they seem minor. Celebrate these steps as evidence of your growth. The poison of comparison, freedom from envy. The Buddha warned against comparing ourselves to others, as it breeds envy and dissatisfaction. He likened it to drinking poison, harming ourselves while gaining nothing. Instead, he encouraged contentment and focusing on our own path. Modern example. Social media amplifies the tendency to compare. Seeing curated highlights of others' lives can make us feel inadequate. But we must remember that everyone has their own struggles, many of which are hidden. Practical tip. Limit your time on social media or curate your feed to include inspiring and educational content. When you feel envy, practice gratitude for your own journey and achievements. Coconut water, refining the mind. The Buddha compared spiritual refinement to transforming raw coconut water into a pure, sweet drink. The process involves filtering impurities, just as meditation and mindfulness help purify the mind of unwholesome thoughts and habits. Practical exercise. Set aside time for meditation each day, even if it's just 5 minutes. Use this time to observe your thoughts and gently redirect them toward kindness, patience, or gratitude. Over time, this practice sweetens the mind. The cooked rice, applying wisdom. The Buddha likened his teachings to cooked rice. While the rice is prepared and ready, it's up to us to eat it and gain nourishment. Similarly, the Dhamma provides guidance, but we must apply it in our lives to experience its benefits. Modern insight. Many of us consume knowledge, books, courses, or spiritual teachings without applying it. True wisdom comes not from knowing but from doing. Action step. Choose one teaching from this video or text that resonates with you. Commit to applying it for 1 week. Whether it's mindfulness, letting go, or practicing gratitude, reflect on how this practice impacts your life. The nation of the mind, cultivating inner harmony. The Buddha compared the mind to a nation. Just as a well-governed nation thrives, a disciplined mind fosters peace and clarity. Without mindfulness, the citizens of our mind, thoughts, emotions, and desires run in chaos. Practical tip. Each morning, set an intention to govern your mind with mindfulness and kindness. Throughout the day, check in with yourself. Am I acting in alignment with my intention? This practice helps cultivate inner harmony. Conclusion for this section. The teachings of the Buddha continue to guide us toward balance, patience, and freedom from unnecessary suffering. Whether it's learning from fire, finding the middle way, or refining the mind, these lessons remind us that the path to peace begins with small, consistent steps. Call to action. Choose one lesson from this section, whether it's avoiding comparison, practicing balance, or cultivating patience, and make it part of your daily life. Each small step brings you closer to the freedom and clarity the Buddha described. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with the final set of lessons or expand on specific ideas. Removing the weeds, clearing the path for growth. The Buddha compared negative habits and thoughts to weeds in a garden. To allow the plants of virtue, wisdom, and mindfulness to grow, we must first clear the weeds, our attachments, aversions, and ignorance. Removing these weeds requires effort and persistence. but it creates space for peace and clarity. Modern example. Think of procrastination as a weed. It might seem harmless at first, but over time, it crowds out productivity and focus. By addressing it head-on, perhaps through time management or breaking tasks into smaller steps, you can clear the way for progress. Reflection exercise. Identify one weed in your mental garden, a habit or thought pattern that holds you back. Write down one small step you can take today to begin removing it. The heavy glass again, practicing non-attachment. Returning to the metaphor of the heavy glass. The Buddha emphasized the importance of releasing unnecessary burdens. Many of us hold on to things, grudges, fears, or expectations that weigh us down. Letting go isn't about indifference, it's about freeing ourselves from self-inflicted suffering. Practical tip. Each evening, reflect on one worry or resentment you've carried that day. Visualize placing it down, like setting a glass on the table. Practice this daily to cultivate the habit of releasing what no longer serves you. Illustrative story. A woman once asked a monk how to let go of her anger. The monk handed her a stone and said, "Carry this with you wherever you go." After a few hours, the woman returned, exhausted. The monk smiled and said, "Letting go of anger is like putting down the stone. The relief is immediate." Pouncing on fire, reacting versus responding. An untrained mind is like a child reaching for fire, it acts impulsively, often causing harm. Mindfulness trains us to pause and observe before reacting, transforming impulsive reactions into thoughtful responses. Modern insight. Think about how we often send impulsive emails or say things in anger, only to regret them later. Pausing, even for a moment, can prevent unnecessary conflict and create space for understanding. Practical exercise. The next time you feel triggered, count to 5 before responding. Use this pause to check in with your emotions and consider a more constructive response. The spider's web, the center of awareness. The mind, like a spider in its web, can remain centered and alert even as external stimuli arise. This metaphor reminds us that mindfulness doesn't eliminate challenges but allows us to face them from a place of balance. Everyday application. When faced with distractions, whether it's a ringing phone or a stressful situation, practice returning to your center. Take a deep breath. Ground yourself, and approach the moment mindfully. Mindfulness exercise. Spend 5 minutes observing your breath today. Each time your mind wanders, gently bring it back to your breathing. This practice strengthens your ability to remain centered amid life's vibrations. Only one hole open, focusing on what matters. The Buddha compared the mind to a water jug with only one opening. If we pour water from the wrong side, nothing flows. Similarly, when we scatter our attention, we achieve little. Concentrating on what truly matters allows us to make meaningful progress. Practical tip. Set a clear intention for each day, one thing you want to focus on. Whether it's completing a project, spending quality time with loved ones, or practicing self-care. Let this intention guide your actions. Example story. A teacher once told his student to carry a single candle through a dark room, focusing only on keeping the flame alive. By concentrating on this one task, the student navigated obstacles with ease. The teacher explained, "Your life is the room, the candle is your focus. Guard it well." The nation of the mind, cultivating inner leadership. The Buddha compared the mind to a nation that thrives under wise leadership. Without mindfulness and discipline, the citizens of the mind, thoughts, emotions, and desires become chaotic. With mindful governance, the mind finds peace and clarity. Practical insight. Each morning, set an intention to lead your mind with kindness, patience, and focus. Throughout the day, check in with yourself. Am I leading my thoughts? Or are they leading me? Reflection practice. At the end of the day, review your nation. Did you act in alignment with your values? Celebrate your successes and learn from your challenges. The middle path revisited, embracing balance. The middle path is a recurring theme in the Buddha's teachings, emphasizing balance in all things. Whether it's work and rest, effort and relaxation, or ambition and contentment, finding the right balance fosters harmony. Modern example. Think about how easy it is to overcommit at work, leading to burnout. Practicing the middle path might mean setting boundaries, taking regular breaks, and prioritizing self-care alongside productivity. Actionable step. Identify one area in your life where you feel unbalanced. What small adjustments can you make to bring it closer to the middle path? For example, if you've been working too much, schedule time for relaxation or hobbies this week. The stick in the stream, letting go of resistance. The Buddha's metaphor of the stick in the stream reminds us that resistance to life's natural flow creates suffering. By letting go of attachment to outcomes, we allow ourselves to move freely toward peace and liberation. Reflection exercise. Think about something you're resisting, a change, a decision, or an emotion. Ask yourself, what would it feel like to let go of this resistance? Visualize the stick releasing itself from the banks of the stream and flowing freely. The glass of water, lightening the load. Carrying burdens, whether emotional, mental, or physical, can feel like holding a glass of water. The longer we hold it, the heavier it feels. The Buddha's teachings remind us to set the glass down regularly, creating space for rest and renewal. Practical application. Build small moments of rest into your day. Whether it's a short walk, a few deep breaths, or simply closing your eyes for a minute. These pauses help lighten the mental and emotional load. Conclusion for this section. These teachings emphasize the practical wisdom of the Buddha, guiding us to live with balance, mindfulness, and inner peace. By letting go of unnecessary burdens, cultivating focus, and embracing the middle path, we create a life of clarity and fulfillment. Call to action. Choose one teaching from this section, whether it's practicing non-attachment, focusing on what matters, or finding balance, and make it a daily habit. Each step you take on this path brings you closer to lasting peace. Let me know if you'd like to continue with the final lessons or explore specific teachings in more depth. Cutting through illusions, seeing reality clearly. The Buddha taught that our minds are often clouded by illusions, misperceptions of ourselves, others, and the world. These illusions, like fog, obscure the path to truth and keep us trapped in suffering. Through mindfulness and insight, we can cut through these illusions and see reality clearly. Modern insight. Consider how we often judge situations or people based on assumptions rather than facts. For instance, you might misinterpret someone's silence as disapproval when they're simply preoccupied. Recognizing these tendencies helps us respond with wisdom rather than reaction. Reflection practice. The next time you catch yourself making an assumption, pause and ask, what evidence supports this belief? Could there be another explanation? This practice fosters clarity and reduces unnecessary conflict. The mango seed, planting the right intentions. The Buddha compared karma to a seed. What you plant today determines the fruit you'll harvest tomorrow. By planting wholesome intentions through kindness, generosity, and mindfulness, you ensure that your future is filled with peace and joy. Illustrative story. A farmer planted mango seeds with great care, knowing that each tree would take years to bear fruit. When the trees finally blossomed, they provided nourishment for his entire family. Similarly, our small acts of goodness today create a ripple effect of positivity in the future. Actionable tip. Start each day with a simple intention. Today, I will plant seeds of kindness and mindfulness. Throughout the day, look for opportunities to act in alignment with this intention. The tree and its shadow, understanding the self. The Buddha used the analogy of a tree and its shadow to explain the concept of not-self, anatta. Just as the shadow is not the tree, our thoughts, emotions, and even our physical bodies are not our true selves. This realization frees us from clinging and fear. Modern application. Think about how often we identify with our roles, possessions, or achievements. When these change or are lost, we feel destabilized. Recognizing that these are not who we truly are allows us to live with greater freedom and resilience. Reflection exercise. Spend a few moments reflecting on the question, who am I beyond my roles and possessions? Let this inquiry deepen your understanding of not-self. The stick that doesn't get snagged, moving with grace. The Buddha likened the mind to a stick floating in a stream. If it doesn't get caught on the banks of pleasure or pain, it flows smoothly toward liberation. This metaphor teaches us the importance of moving through life without clinging to joy or resisting sorrow. Everyday example. Imagine being praised at work. While it's natural to feel happy, clinging to that praise can lead to anxiety about maintaining it. Conversely, receiving criticism can cause unnecessary suffering if we resist it. The middle way is about accepting both experiences without attachment. Practical exercise. The next time you receive praise or criticism, take a moment to observe your reaction. Practice saying to yourself, "This, too, shall pass." The poisoned arrow, focusing on what matters. The Buddha once told a story about a man struck by a poisoned arrow. Instead of seeking immediate help, the man demanded to know who shot the arrow, why they did it, and what kind of arrow it was. Meanwhile, the poison spread. This story teaches us to focus on what's truly important rather than getting caught up in distractions. Modern insight. How often do we waste energy on minor details or unnecessary worries, ignoring what truly matters? Whether it's in relationships, work, or personal growth, staying focused on the bigger picture saves time and emotional energy. Reflection practice. Identify one area in your life where you've been focusing on arrows that don't matter. Redirect your energy toward what will bring healing, peace, or progress. The spider's alertness, staying present. The Buddha likened the trained mind to a spider, always alert to movements in its web. When the spider senses a disturbance, it responds skillfully. Similarly, mindfulness keeps us present, allowing us to respond to life's challenges with clarity. Mindfulness tip. Set an hourly reminder on your phone to pause and take 3 mindful breaths. Use this moment to check in with your emotions and surroundings, anchoring yourself in the present. Example story. A woman struggling with anxiety started using this practice during her workday. Over time, these small pauses helped her stay grounded, reducing her stress and improving her focus. The glass half full. Gratitude as a practice. Gratitude is a cornerstone of the Buddha's teachings. By focusing on what we have rather than what we lack, we cultivate contentment and joy. It's like seeing the glass as half full instead of half empty. Practical exercise. Each night before bed, write down 3 things you're grateful for. They can be as simple as a delicious meal, a kind word, or a moment of quiet. Over time, this practice shifts your perspective toward abundance. Illustrative story. A monk once carried a cracked water pot to the river daily, losing water along the way. When someone pointed out the flaw, the monk smiled and said, "The water that leaks nourishes the plants along the path. Even imperfections bring blessings." The cooked rice, turning knowledge into wisdom. The Buddha emphasized the importance of applying knowledge. Just as cooked rice must be eaten to provide nourishment, wisdom comes from practicing what we learn. Modern insight. In today's age of information, it's easy to collect knowledge without applying it. The true transformation happens when we act on what we know. Whether it's practicing mindfulness, letting go of anger, or cultivating compassion. Actionable tip. Choose one teaching from this section that resonates with you. Commit to practicing it for a week, observing how it impacts your thoughts and actions. Conclusion: walking the path. The Buddha's teachings are not abstract philosophies, they are a practical guide to living with peace, clarity, and purpose. Each metaphor, story, and lesson offers a step on the path to awakening. By reflecting on these teachings and incorporating them into daily life, we draw closer to the freedom and fulfillment the Buddha described. Final call to action. Choose one key takeaway from this journey, whether it's mindfulness, gratitude, or letting go, and make it a cornerstone of your daily practice. Remember, the path to liberation begins with a single step.